Hey everyone, my name is Jaden Cottrell, and today my persuasive speech is going to be about combat sports athletes developing chronic traumatic encephalopathy, better known as CTE. So, to start off, I'm a fighter. I train mixed martial arts at the pit in Arroyo Grande, and after a long day of training, I think to myself, I take off my gloves and think, in 10 years, how am I going to be feeling? Am I going to have the same mental state? Is my physical state going to be the same? I worry about it. A lot of you may have seen the movie Concussion. It's a movie about NFL players and a doctor who developed a study studying CTE in all the football players because of the repeated blows to the head. And today, I think to myself, wow, it can't only just be football players. I see MMA fighters in the UFC and boxing take strikes to the head like no other. One example would be last weekend. UFC 264, a fighter named Chris Moutinho took 236 significant strikes to the head, a new record for a bantamweight. A video after the fight showed him bloodied, bruised, and beat up. And I think, in 10 years, is he going to have the same mental state as before? So, more about CTE is that it's a disease that leads to mental disability. It can lead to irritability, depression, suicidal thoughts, very small things make you angry, and it develops a mental state that a lot of people cannot live with. So, 90% of current MMA fighters and boxers are expected to develop CTE at some point in their lifetime, which is a large number. If you think about it, only 10% may not, which you would be very lucky to be one of the 10%. And right now, 78% of former boxers who have had a autopsy on their brains after their death have shown signs of CTE in their brains. This has led to many of them ending up hurting people, hurting themselves, and even killing themselves. So, an example of CTE in a UFC fighter. Balbu Sobral is currently suffering from CTE. He was a UFC veteran, a fighter for over 5 years in the UFC. He suffered concussions, broken legs, broken arms, broken toes, every injury you can think about. Currently today, he states he cannot walk a straight line. A very unfortunate time for him. His brain is so messed up that he cannot walk a straight line anymore. He also has peaks of depression, cannot listen well, has lost eyesight in his left eye, and many other things to go onto that list. After 13 surgeries, he decided it was time to walk away from the UFC. And after 5 years, he developed CTE that has caused him to live his life in a much different way than before. So, many symptoms of CTE are very present today. So we see a lot of people in combat sports, such as MMA fighters. One example would be Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje is a fighter who is a brawler. He takes strikes left and right. He throws strikes left and right. Does not like to get on the mat a lot to wrestle or grapple. Justin Gaethje took over 385 significant strikes over his first 5 fights in the UFC. Just imagine being hit by a fist as hard as you can 385 times in 5 fights over a span of 2 years. It's got to do some kind of damage to somebody's brain. And before his fight at UFC 249 against Tony Ferguson, there was a lot of signs of him showing that he was not the same mentally as he was before. He was constantly forgetting interview questions from people that had just asked him a question. He had constantly had these small icks and irritabilities that were making him mad over the course of the week. And unfortunately, it led him to have a very bad fight week. And luckily for him, he won, but after and before, he did not seem like the same person as he was when he entered the UFC. Gaethje even admitted himself 2 weeks after the fight he was having trouble staying focused on the next task at hand. He was forgetting what his trainers were directing him to do during the fight, and he was forgetting little simple things that he knew before the fight happened. Unfortunately, CTE is a disease that the UFC and boxing officials have not fully addressed yet in their fighters and their athletes. Dana White did once say, "Listen, Jeff Fisher, a fighter who developed CTE, is not the first, and he's definitely not going to be the last. This is a contact sport, and everybody who's ever done this while younger, myself included, is dealing with brain issues. It's just part of the gig. Unfortunately, this sounds like a major downplay of the effects CTE can have on the athletes. 61.2% of UFC fighters responded yes to worrying about their long-term health. 28.8% said no, 9.4% said maybe, and 0.6% did not want to answer that question about long-term brain damage. Unfortunately, CTE is not a broad topic in combat sports yet. And the knowledge that people need to know is that after they're done with fighting, they're going to have issues. They're not going to be the same person they were before, and they'll never recover from that. Unfortunately, UFC President Dana White and other boxing officials do not want to recognize this in order to save revenue and save money. So, interesting enough, many officials would rather save money than save a person's life. Fighters like Khabib Nurmagomedov, Islam Makhachev, and Damian Maia may be fighters who don't get to have that experience of the CTE as much because they are primarily grapplers. But fighters like Justin Gaethje, Luke Rockhold, and Dan Hooker may be very concerned about the long-term effects that may be on their brains. The UFC has put some preventative measures to stop fighters from taking too much damage. For example, many fighters are only allowed to fight 3 to 4 times per year. That is a limit. Most fighters only fight 3 times per year. Many fighters also have to be medically cleared by a doctor and a specialized doctor for any injuries or concussions occurred in a fight. So the UFC is taking measures to prevent as much long-term brain damage as they can. Unfortunately, it's already prominent in a lot of the fighters today. In conclusion, CTE is going to affect combat sports athletes one way or another. There's no way to avoid it. Taking strikes to the head is always going to lead to some type of brain damage in the end. Fighters may need to sacrifice some of their fighting career for some of their life after their fighting career. If they want to have a normal life after, they have to make the sacrifice now.